I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I'm mostly making this video because LangFocused hasn't yet, and I want to complete the trifecta of videos comparing the big three languages of East Asia. To quickly summarize, Mandarin Chinese is primarily spoken in the northern and western parts of China, while Korean is primarily spoken in the Korean peninsula, with a significant number of speakers in the Jilin province of China. Korean largely forms its own language family called Koreanic, the only other member of which is the Jeju language spoken on Jeju Island, while Mandarin and the other varieties of Chinese form the Sinitic languages, themselves a part of the larger Sino-Tibetan language family, which includes Tibetan and Burmese, among others. Korean and Mandarin have a significant number of similarities with regards to sounds and grammar, and a lot of the vocabulary is similar because Chinese borrowings represent a large portion of Korean's lexicon, but writing is unintelligible between the two in the modern day. No more dilly-dallying, let's cover specific details, starting with sounds. Mandarin and Korean both distinguish between plain stops and affricates but, pa, ta, ka, and cha, with aspirated pa, ta, ka, and cha. Mandarin additionally has the sounds tsa, cha, tsa, cha, and both languages lack phonemic voiced obstruents, although Korean voices its plain stops and affricates between vowels or after a voiced coda, and Mandarin voices its own when they take the reduced fifth tone, with Korean doing this voicing far more often than Mandarin.
사자,
狮子,
The syllable structure is also similar between the two languages, with syllables at most having a consonant, followed by a semivowel glide, a vowel nucleus, and then a coda consonant. The main coda consonants of Mandarin are na and nga, and Standard Chinese has erhua, which could be comparable to coda l in Korean, and coda ma occurs very marginally in casual speech, but otherwise, the Korean codas pa, ta, ka do not exist in Mandarin, although they do exist in most other varieties of Chinese, including Cantonese and Hokkien. Here's a quick comparison of coda consonants in Mandarin and Korean, using the consonant-vowel pair na in both languages.
na, nan, nang, nar,
나, 남, 난, 낭, 날, 납, 낫, 낙.
Korean and Mandarin both have the glides ya and wa very frequently in words. The labial palatal glide yue occurs less often in Mandarin than the other two and has fewer possible finals. Korean also has this glide, but only in the sequence yu, which is pronounced yu in more conservative Korean dialects. In my personal analysis, Mandarin has 5 phonemic vowels, in addition to the lack of a vowel which is only used for 7 syllables, but has about 11 different vowel qualities, most of which I believe are comparable to the 7 or 8 Korean vowels depending on the dialect. As for differences, a major one is that Mandarin and the other Chinese languages are tonal, and while Korean used to also be tonal, it lost its tone in the majority of its dialects. In some of these dialects, the tones gave way to a length distinction in Korean, a contrast of short and long vowels, which does not exist in Mandarin. The younger generations of Korean speakers are actually starting to redevelop tone, as they often aspirate the plain stops at the beginnings of words. The only difference from the aspirated stops being that the plain stops have a low tone, while the aspirated ones have a higher tone. Korean doesn't have any diphthongs. All the ones in Old Korean shifted to single vowels or glides, while Mandarin still retains the vowels I, ao, a, and o. Korean has the tense consonants
빠, 짜, 따, 까, 싸싸.
which don't appear in Mandarin Chinese, or most languages for that matter. Korean also lacks a phonemic fa sound in contrast with Mandarin, but when the glottal fricative ha is followed by o, u, or wa, it's pronounced fwa, more like an F. By far the area where Mandarin and Korean differ most is in their writing systems. Korean used to be written with Chinese characters, as Mandarin is today, but in the 1400s Hangul was created, and while neglected by the Korean elites for centuries, it eventually became the predominant writing system throughout the Korean peninsula. Hangul does somewhat resemble Chinese characters, since individual letters are grouped together in syllable blocks. Much like how with Hanzi, similar elements known as radicals are grouped together to form characters, but no matter the complexity, they still take up the same amount of space when typed out. While they do share some aesthetic similarities, the two writing systems have entirely different functions, as Hanzi primarily convey meaning, with only a hint in the majority of them on how they're pronounced, while the phonemic Hangul only shows the sounds of words, with no attempt to show the meaning. Chinese characters in Korean, known as Hanja, are still occasionally used today, primarily in dictionaries and rarely in formal contexts like newspapers, to disambiguate between two words which are spelled the same in Hangul. When Hanja are used, Korean exclusively has traditional characters, while Mandarin is written with simplified characters by the vast majority of its speakers, those living in China, Singapore, and Malaysia, whereas traditional is used elsewhere. Another note is that Korean uses spaces in between words, as opposed to all varieties of Chinese which do not when written with Hanzi. Now to compare the grammar of Mandarin and Korean. Both languages put adjectives and other modifiers before the noun. Small turtle.
小乌龟
작은 거북,
Mandarin generally has subject-verb-object-word order, while Korean sentences use subject-object-verb word order. Mandarin does have a special construction using the verb ba, which puts the object before the main verb to make the sentence more similar to SOV. I ate fish.
我把鱼吃完了
저는 생선을 먹었어요.
Korean uses postpositions placed after the nouns they modify, while Mandarin has prepositions before the noun, although it does have a significant amount of postpositions as well. To the house.
到家
집으로,
In the house.
家里
집에,
Both languages make use of noun classifiers, also called counters, which are used with number words to count a specific category of nouns. The exact classifiers differ between the languages, but there are plenty which function the same. Mandarin and Korean can both drop subject pronouns if they're clear from context, even without any personal verb agreement in either language. Of course, the grammar and syntax are not entirely similar. Mandarin is strictly an analytic language, where each grammar element is easily separable from the noun, verb, or adjective, while Korean is highly agglutinative, with suffixes directly attaching to nouns and verbs. I will play games with friends.
我会跟朋友玩游戏
저는 친구와 게임을 하겠어요.
Korean has particles for marking the subject, object, and topic, which appear in the majority of sentences outside of casual speech, while Mandarin doesn't require any marking of a noun's role in a sentence besides its prepositions and postpositions. Formality is also extremely important in Korean, and many grammatical patterns change based on the politeness level that the speaker is using, while in modern Mandarin Chinese it is nowhere near as important and is limited to changes in word choice. Speaking of which, vocabulary. Because of centuries of influence from various Chinese dynasties, around 60% of Korean vocabulary is of Chinese origin. The forms are not entirely the same, as Korean borrowed most of its Sinitic vocabulary from Middle Chinese, and there's not only been a drift from Middle Chinese to Mandarin Chinese, but also from Old and Middle Korean to Modern Korean. Additionally, the majority of Korean words used in everyday conversation are of native Korean origin, and unlike Mandarin Chinese, which generally avoids loanwords outside of proper names, Modern Korean, at least in the South, is filled with plenty of loanwords, particularly from English. Nevertheless, here's a bunch of examples of Sino-Korean cognates. Completely.
完全
완전,
Society.
社会
사회,
Period.
时代
시대,
Participation.
参加
참가,
World.
世界
세계,
Marriage.
结婚
결혼,
Mountain.
山
산,
Oneself.
自己
자기,
Importance.
主要
주요,
South Korea.
韩国
한국,
Largest.
最大
최대,
Space.
空间
공간,
Exercise.
运动
운동,
Attitude.
态度
태도,
7.
七
7,
Generally speaking, for Chinese vocabulary in Korean, the null final in Mandarin corresponds to Korean a, the Mandarin diphthong ao to Korean o, Mandarin I to Korean e, Mandarin coda n to either ma or na in Korean, and Mandarin fa to Korean pa. I'm hoping to someday make a video comparing not just the initials and finals of Sinitic vocabulary in Mandarin and Korean, but also for Japanese, Vietnamese, and Cantonese as well. Let me know if y'all are interested in that. Subscribe if you tolerated this video enough to not actively want to hit me with a crowbar. Thanks to Jojagi for recording the Korean voice lines and Novermac who recorded the Mandarin voice lines, and has his own channel with conlanging videos. Thank you to my Patreon supporters SC von Nostrand, Sunder, Erica Sim, Adam Zhinek, Kakithion, Luke Jensen, Jolly Pikachu, Andrew Brown, Alexis Esquedes, Carol Soul, and Peter F. And until next time, 大家多吧 and 再见.